Hey guys, Miss White here from Michigan again. Uh, Going over this week's slides for you guys. Oh boy. So, this Unit 7, is the antebellum era, which is the era right before the Civil War, 1840s, until South Carolina decided to say deuces to the United States, which this unit will end on. Um, there isn't a whole lot of information, so that's why this unit's going by really fast, which means we get to talk about the Civil War even more. Bear with me on this, folks. You and I both know I'm capable of talking fast, so let's get to getting. We left off before talking about education reforms and temperance reforms, getting rid of alcohol. So now we're going to focus on more reforms from there. All right, so today we're starting with the mental health reforms. Oh boy, hot topic, especially in today's day and age, but imagine it back in the 1840s, all right? So before the antebellum era, mental health asylums were basically prisons, and they were terrible, all right? So follow me on this, right? People in the 1700s believed that if you were mentally unhealthy, it was a choice. You're choosing to be sad. You're choosing to be nervous and anxious. You're choosing to be really down and then really hyper, right? Of course, nowadays we know that that's not true, and that's also not how you fix the mental health issues of a person. So anyway, they're like, well, you must be a bad person if you're faking this illness, if you're choosing to be sad all the time, which if any of you have ever dealt with depression or anxiety, you know it's a lot more than just feeling sad or nervous, right? Mental health hospitals were designed to fix the wrong behavior. Right? Windowless patients were beaten or chained to beds. Of course, we all know famously, even during the mental health reforms, lobotomies, right? When they would take out a portion of your frontal lobe of your brain, or electric shock therapy. Eventually, in the 1960s and 70s, they explored with LSD to control the mind. Crazy stuff. Research it on your own free time. It's actually really interesting and also kind of scary. This was not a place to be, right? The goal was to isolate these people from society. And again, mental health, you're not supposed to isolate people from society. You're supposed to help them and make them feel as normal as they can, right? Because again, we see it today as it is. It's a chemical imbalance in the brain, but back then, remember, it was a choice. Okay. So that sucked. So we got this woman, Dorothea Dix, and I'm telling you, she is a homie to the core. She is responsible for creating the first generation of mental asylums in the United States. There she is, pictured on the right there, right? She's from Massachusetts. She spoke out against the poor treatment of insane persons in Massachusetts, right? She basically came up with the idea that you can't treat them like criminals, like people who actually break the law. You can't compare someone with depression to a murderer. That doesn't make sense. It's not the same thing up here, right? And again, we know that with modern science. Back then, this was groundbreaking, like, whoa. So anyway, she established some hospitals in like Worcester, Massachusetts, so like some central state. And she was responsible for separating them from prisoners, right? Because beforehand, the mentally insane were thrown in prison cells with real criminals, again, murderers, rapists, people who commit theft and arson and all that stuff, right? So Dorothea Dix said, nope, you got to create a separate facility for them because it's a whole different animal to tame. So that's mental health reforms. Again, I will show you some ghost stories of them throughout the week because you know me. Next, we got prison reforms. Like I just said, they were a terrible place, very similar to what you would think, like very similar to the mental health situation before this time. All right, prisons were super unsanitary, a lot of torture back in the day, and people were thrown in jail for literally the stupidest reasons. If you were in debt, you were thrown in jail, which most people in today's society are in debt, whether it's student loan debt or credit card debt, or they bought a mortgage or a car. But back in the 1700s, if you had debt, you were deemed useless. You have a debt because you are lazy, you're not working hard enough. Throw you in jail until you pay off that debt. So anyway, that was terrible. People This is not a place to be. Prison is still not a place to be, by the way. just my PSA for you guys. But they would torture people in prison, right? You're a criminal. You broke the law and you deserve to pay for it, right? Whereas today, again, and with this, people wanted to fix prisons, and instead of making it shame on you, you're bad, you're going to die in this prison cell, today we see it as more, we're going to rehabilitate you, and the goal is to get you out of prison so you can go back into society as a contributing member instead of just somebody who breaks the law all the time, right? That's why we have like GED programs in prison now, and you can get trained in the trades in prison now, because the goal is to make sure to fix you, to rehabilitate you, right? So anyway, we got people coming in here and using the Constitution. You're breaking the Fifth Amendment, people. If you're torturing people, the Fifth Amendment says no cruel or unusual punishments. That's also the one where it's basically you have the right to remain silent, right? So anyway, you can't torture people. It's frowned upon, and that breaks the Constitution. So anyway, you got these people coming in here. And like I just said, now we're going from punishing criminals to rehabilitating them. Again, they can only get better if you treat them like a real person. I mean, that to us, again, that's common sense. Like, yes, is it frowned upon to kill somebody? Absolutely, right? Like being a murderer. But if you go around the rest of your life like you suck, right? That person isn't going to get any better if you keep telling them that they're awful. So again, the prison reforms are just like, hey man, you made a mistake, right? So let's try and fix you. So if you do get released, you can be a better member of society. And again, to us, common sense. Back then, groundbreaking. Now we're getting to women's rights. We're not going to talk too much about this right now, even though it obviously is important. But we got a lot of things happening, right? So remember, the antebellum era was to fix society before the second coming of Jesus Christ, right? So let's make women a crucial member of society right now, right? They were influenced by the Second Great Awakening again, right? Jesus coming back. So what can I do to be better, right? The Industrial Revolution created jobs for women. So for the first time ever, they were working. Women spoke out against all the limitation of roles that they had in society. Women deserve an education too. Women deserve to have jobs in politics. We have a right to say what's going on in our country. The movement began, this is a crucial part that you will see for your benchmark here in a few weeks. The movement began when women saw parallels between their situation and slavery. Now, yes, that sounds extreme, right? You can't really compare that to slavery. I mean, slavery was a 350-year-old institution of oppression, right? Whereas women not having the right to get an education is a little bit different, right? But their train of thought was, right, like, we can't get certain jobs. We can't do certain things in society just like slaves can't. Now, again, it's a bit of a stretch because, again, slavery, super terrible. Don't get me wrong, the lack of women's rights is terrible too, but not as bad as slavery, bear with me on this, right? Anyway, we have the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848. This is super famous. This is where Elizabeth Cady Stanton comes into play. If you don't know who she is, she's basically America's first feminist. Anyway, so they discussed social, civil, and religious rights for women. It was just a bunch of feminists in a room. That's really it. Ooh, help, wrong way. As you can see there, right? So you can go see notable women on your own. Because I'm trying to make this video as short as humanly possible. Where'd I go? Guys, help me. All right. So now we're getting to abolitionism. Abolitionism, remember, is trying to get rid of slavery. All right. So the arguments, people who supported slavery, right? So yes, people who supported slavery were usually racist, right? But it wasn't because like, oh, we have to keep them oppressed. It was economy. If we get rid of slavery, the economy is going to collapse. If you think about the economy in the South, remember, they didn't industrialize in the Industrial Revolution like the North did. So their main source of income wasn't in factories like cities like New York or Boston. Their main source of income was coming from the plantations. And who ran the fields of the plantations? Slaves. So, I mean, yes, they were also racist. I'm not saying that they were good people. I mean, come on. But they saw it from an economic standpoint. If we get rid of this, the economy is going to crash, which, as we're experiencing right now, being in a recession, it's not good when the economy is not doing good, right? However, of course, the side that I think we all can relate to more, the people who were against slavery, the abolitionists, were like, this is morally wrong. You can't own people, right? You can't own a human being. You can't put a price tag on a human being, right? So that's bad, obviously. All right. Ways around slavery. There were a few ways around it back during this time. Now, these abolitionists thought of a lot of different things. This one was actually super, super racist. This is the American Colonization Society. This is the American Colonization Society. They assisted freed slaves, so slaves who bought their freedom. They assisted them in emigrating back to Africa. Okay, remember, emigrating with the E means they're exiting the United States and going elsewhere. It was established by that dude picture there. Now we're like, okay, they were forced to come to a land that they're not native to, so send them back to where they came from, right? Which, of course, nowadays sounds awful. Go back to where you come from, right? Same sort of connotations with this as well. In 1847 was when the country of Liberia became a real country in Western Africa. It still is a country to this day, and it was established in 1822 by American freed slaves, right? Now, right, they saw it back then as like, wow, like, we're doing such a good thing. Now, the reason why they were doing this is because these guys in the American Colonization Society wanted them to go away, right? We don't want African Americans in our society. Get them out of here, right? The more you get out of here, the less problems you have. See how it's racist? And they also sent them to Liberia. Now, think about it. This is the 1840s, right? So the slaves on the plantations, the slave trade officially stopped in 1807, right? People were no longer like native. Slaves were no longer native of Africa, right? Like, they born and raised in the United States, right? So these people sent these freed slaves back to Africa, where they died of disease because they weren't used to African diseases anymore. Again, when you are raised in the United States your entire life, you're used to the diseases that we get around here, not the diseases that are over there, which is why when you go to some countries around the world, still to this day, you have to get certain vaccines to go there because we're not used to the diseases that they have there, right? So a lot of these freed slaves actually died upon going back to Liberia, Africa. So again, this super racist, not that great of an idea, but at the time, they thought they were heroes. We got the Underground Railroad. This one is the most famous, so I won't spend that much time on it because we already know what the Underground Railroad is. Last year, I had a student legitimately ask me if the Underground Railroad was really an underground railroad, like a subway. So, without further ado on that, no, it was just a network of secret routes, right? Connecting house to house. As you can see here, some looked like actual houses. Some you hid underground during the day because most of the traveling was done at night, so you weren't seen. Right? We had conductors of the Underground Railroad as well, like Harriet Tubman, right? The movie just came out about her not too long ago. And she risked her life to help navigate escaping slaves to freedom, which is pretty awesome. And again, she risked her life to do so. But again, what would you do, right? It's a very interesting time in American history, right? So we got the Underground Railroad. Again, y'all can read through the descriptions here. Here is the trailer for the movie 12 Years a Slave. I was thinking of showing you guys this year. I highly, highly recommend this film if you have never seen it. However, it is rated R for a lot of obvious reasons. So again, make sure you have permission before you watch it. It's what I would imagine to be super accurate. Which makes it so graphic and why it's rated R, because obviously slavery sucked, right? And this movie is the true story about a man who was a free slave. He was free, living in the North, and he got kidnapped and sold into slavery. And so he spent 12 years as a slave. Okay. Again, true story, absolute true story. The acting in it is phenomenal. Again, I highly, highly recommend this movie. I can't say that enough. Of course, we got Harriet Tubman. The other way around it was To Revolt. Now, there is another movie out there about this guy pictured here, Nat Turner. Okay. This guy was a very interesting story behind him, right? What he did is he organized a rebellion. He got other slaves in the area behind him. Let's revolt. Let's steal their weapons and revolt against the white man, right? And they were successful for a little bit, but not super successful. All right. So they got they got the weapons from the white owners, but they were caught. Obviously, the white man shut them down. And this is where a lot of slaves were killed, punished terribly. Nat Turner himself was hanged as a result. So, not good. There is a movie about the Nat Turner Rebellion called The Birth of a Nation, not to be confused with the movie from the early 1900s. That movie is insanely racist. This is a newer one made a few years ago about the Nat Turner Rebellion. I personally have not seen it. I've heard nothing but great things about it. Here is a trailer for it right here. Again, if you want to watch it, go for it. Let me know what you think because I've never seen it. Right? So I'll let you see that. So now I'm finally coming to an end here, guys. Last slide. The antebellum era. Remember, they were trying to fix society before the coming of Jesus Christ. Was it successful? You can argue yes, because there were certain aspects of American society that changed for the better. Education got better. More people had access to education instead of the rich white few. Prisons got a little bit better and cleaner. The mentally ill were taken care of better. They were treated more humanely. However, this is also not successful because our next unit is the Civil War. Okay, so the antebellum era was great. The antebellum era was great, sorry about that, because it did reform things, but it didn't attack the central issue. All right, it didn't talk about slavery is the main issue. What are we going to do about it? Some people in the country like to think that it's not a problem. Other people in the country think it is a major problem. But let's fix education. Let's see how that works. So it obviously wasn't successful because in 1860, South Carolina said deuces to the Union and they created the Confederate States of America, their own nation, people. They literally started their own nation. South Carolina, the South, they suck. Shortly after, other states followed suit. It was a mess. And then boom, Civil War. All right. Pardon the long video. All right. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to email me. All right. We will be getting to the Civil War soon. Mad love to you guys. Stay safe. Miss you guys.